Let's hear it for our home team and Aaron Gunn. It's amazing. The reading that Robin shared with us today was from the Daily Word, as you heard, from 1952. Did you know that you could Google your birthday and Daily Word, and you can come up with what the word was for the day of your birth? It's actually pretty cool. So when you get home, Google it, or after service, but not now. And I just want to share again what she read. Beyond every outer appearance, there's an inner pattern of divine perfection. And it's an important piece, that there is a divine pattern of perfection that underlies everything that we do and everything that we are. We are not born in sin. We are perfect in spirit. Now, we may express free will in an imperfect way, but the truth is, even in our flaws, there is a pattern of divine perfection. Jesus said it this way when he said, "Be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Be perfect, even as the divine presence in you is perfect." So we can always align with that divine pattern. This is a basic spiritual principle that we live by. But the truth is, in reality, in small r, we fall short of perfection, do we not? And now we have moments of perfection, like Aaron singing that last song was a moment of perfection. You know, maybe you have a moment of perfection where the meal was perfect, you know. So we have those moments, but the truth is, most of the times, things are not perfect, right? And if we strive, or if we seek only perfection all the time, the chances are we're going to not feel so good, right? We're going to feel less than, we're going to feel a little off, we're going to feel like, what's wrong with me? And we can start playing the blame and the shame game on ourselves, like, oh, I should have done better and I don't know what's wrong with me, or it's all your fault that I didn't. So it's either ourselves or others. And our minds, when we are seeking only perfection all the time, our minds turn to lack and our minds turn to judgment and the idea that we're just not good enough. So when I lived in the yoga ashram, we used to take turns cooking. And we were very limited with what we could use in cooking because the diet was basically vegan. We weren't allowed to use mushrooms or garlic or onions or spices. So it was limited. So I was cooking one night and I thought, all right, what can I make? So I'm going through this cookbook and I see this recipe for a lentil loaf. It's like, instead of a meatloaf, have a lentil loaf. I'm like, oh, I could do that. So I think it took me pretty much all day to make, you know, a couple lentil loaves for, 20, 30 people, whatever. And when it came out of the oven, it didn't look anything like a meatloaf. And it just was like, I just looked at it and I just thought, oh my God, this is absolutely horrible, this thing. And so I was so crushed that I didn't make a perfect lentil loaf, that when the group gathered, we had to bless it, so I did the blessing, and then I ran away, and I hid in my cabin, because I just couldn't stand to hear people saying, what the heck is this, and eating it. And then later they came to find me, and they go, where did you go? You disappeared. And I said, I just couldn't stand to be around that lentil loaf. And they said it was the best lentil loaf we've ever had. I was like, but isn't that what we do with our own crushing perfection inner voice, is that we can crush ourselves on something that may have been just fine. And even if it wasn't, so what? So if there's an inner pattern of divine perfection, then wouldn't your flaws be a part of this pattern? Just as we just heard in the song by Leonard Cohen, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So it's in our moments of being flawed. It's in our moments of weakness. It's in our moments when perhaps that we fail, that we are cracked, that the light gets in, that we're more open perhaps to receiving Spirit in a different way than we ever have. It pushes us out of our routine. It's a moment when we're soft. And the truth is, do you really think that no one notices your flaws, or your imperfections? I mean, sometimes we think we have to pretend to be perfect, but everybody can see our flaws and our imperfections anyway. So why not just take our flaws and our imperfections and just embrace them? Because the truth is, we're all cracked pots. All right. So I want to share with you the story of the cracked pot. Many of you may know it, but it's an old ancient story, and it's about a water bearer who had 2 pots, and every day, twice a day, he would walk down to the stream to fill up the pots with water to bring them back up the hill to the master's house. Well, the problem is that one of the pots was cracked, and so half the water would pour out of it before he got back up the hill. And this went on for 2 years, and one may ask, why didn't he ever fix the pot? But he didn't. And so the pot that was perfect was very proud of itself. It's like, I'm doing my job, I'm doing what I'm meant to do in life, and I feel great. It's very, very proud. But the pot that was cracked felt ashamed and felt terrible and apologized to the water bearer. And he says, I need to apologize to you. And he says, for what? He says, every day, twice a day, you go down to the river, you fill up the pot, and I don't carry my load. By the time you get to the top of the hill, half the water is gone. And he said, I've known about that crack for 2 years. I've known all about it. And you have nothing to be ashamed of. And he said, why? And he said, well, when we go up the hill next time, let me show you. And he said, look down. And every place that they had walked was flowers on one side of the road. He said, I knew that you had a crack, and so what I did is I planted seeds in the ground so that every day when we walked up the hill, you watered these flowers. And look how beautiful all these flowers are going up the hill. And I have picked them and I have put them in the master's house, and you have brought beauty to the master's house through your flaws. So how many flowers do you think may have been planted by you through your flaws? The truth is, the water bearer, I think, represents that inner pattern of divine perfection. The water bearer represents spirit, represents God. And even though we may not be doing things exactly perfect, whatever that is in our own minds, the truth is we're a part of that bigger plan. Because God knows all of our flaws and takes advantage of them for the good of others. So what is imperfect about you that you have recognized as a part of your divine plan? And you don't need to speak that out right now. But how many flowers have you planted through your imperfections? One of the things we do sometimes at Christmas is we have a memorial service for those who have died during the year, or people that we want to remember. And the question that's always asked is, what is it about the person that you love who has died? What is it that you have loved about them the most that can be a part of you? But there's also the other side of that, right? It's like, what didn't they do? What didn't they do in their life that you can do, right? That you can finish that for them. So the last chapter that we were covering in the book, The Soul of the Pilgrim, which is our book study for this year, was about the practice of being uncomfortable. And my hope is that when we go through these chapters together, that you kind of look at it and use it in your life. Like, hopefully over the last month or 6 weeks, you've asked yourself, so what is it that makes me uncomfortable? And what is it that I can do? Because the truth is, that does push us into imperfection and flaws, because when we're trying something new, we don't know what we're doing. So obviously, because I'm teaching this, I have to do it as well. And I've had an interest in like humor and the patterns of that, and how does that work, and how do you learn that? How do you learn that? So I've been Googling on and off over the years, humor, comedy, what do you do? And then this class popped up that was in Seattle. And I read about it, and I thought, well, this would be a good thing to go to, because then I could learn what the patterns are that describe humor, that how it works. And then I read more closely, and it was only 4 weeks on Wednesday nights and in August, and I'm like, I'm not teaching a class this summer, so this is perfect. And the last class was supposed to be a performance at a comedy club in Seattle. And I saw that, and of course I immediately closed the computer and said, forget this, no way. And then I'd go back to it and leave it, go back to it and leave it, and then I'm finally like, all right, I can always drop out. I don't have to necessarily do this, I can drop out. And we met at the Green Lake Senior Center of all places. So we met, and the teacher was amazing, and every week I kept thinking, all right, I can drop out next week. I can drop out next week. And then the truth is that the performance was on my birthday. And not just on my birthday, but on my 65th birthday. And if I've learned nothing from being on this spiritual path, I have learned to listen to signs. I have learned to listen to synchronicities, that when something like that pops up, God's going, hello, I know you don't want to do this. I know you're terrified to do this, but you kind of have to do this. So I'm like, all right, I'll do that, because that means it ruins my birthday, because I can't eat, I can't eat before I speak or go on, and the whole day I'd be distracted, which is true. And so I did it. I went up last week to the Comedy Underground, and thank you for those. Many of you were there, and I appreciate you showing up, and it was terrifying. It was a hyperventilating experience, but it was also really fun. It was like a roller coaster. It was like terrifying, and then it was fast, and it was over, and then it was fun. But what I like about comedy is you don't have to hide your flaws. In comedy, you're asked to embrace them and expose them on stage. And we saw some comedians who would do that, where they would just, show their appearance or whatever, and then find a joke about it. The other thing I like about comedy is you can be fat, you can be old, you can be young, you can be skinny, you can be an immigrant, you can be whatever, you can be anything. And everyone has their own unique sense of humor and their own unique style. And I see a divine pattern that is discovered within each one of us. And each person had to write their own material. We weren't allowed to just tell jokes. We had to write it, and they helped us. So would you like to hear my 4 minutes? So because I was turning 65, again, it felt like the universe was saying, well, why don't you talk about aging? And these are some of the thoughts that I actually have had about what it's like to be 65. Because the truth is, when you're 65, you can't pretend that you're young anymore. You just can't. And they say that 50 is the new 30, and that 60 is the new 40, 65 is 65. No. And when you're born, you are like the star of the show, right? When you're little, you're the star of the show. Everybody wants to see you. Everybody wants all this. Oh, they can't wait to see you. And then you have a sibling, and you become a co-star instead of a star. Maybe then later you get a partner in life, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and you're still a co-star. And then you have children, and they start to grow up, and so you have to step back, because now you're a supporting actor in life. You're supporting them. But when you get to be about my age or older, it's like you have a walk-on part. You are no longer you're no longer the star, the co-star, the supporting actor. You have a walk-on part. You show up at the birthday party. Here's the card. Here's the check. Thank you. I'll see you later. And aging starts out small. It's like, it's cute. You get your little crow's feet here and your little laugh lines, and you get little silver hair here and there. But the truth is, after a while, your hair turns totally gray or bald or whatever. And the truth is, I think it's the universe's way of trying to get rid of us, because it starts by erasing us, right? It's like it takes out the color, so we no longer have color, because we don't need color, because we just have a walk-on part now. We're no longer the center. You know, when I used to go to the gym when I was young, it's like, you know, my body would respond really well. I'd feel stronger and my muscles would. Now I'm lucky if I can leave the gym and not be injured. That's a big deal. And, you know, it's like having a car. Your shoulder hurts, your hip hurts, your knee hurts, and now you can get replacement parts, just like a car. You know, when you're young, you don't have to think about, should I get a kitten or a puppy? Because when you're older, you have to ask the question, is my puppy gonna live longer than me? Is my kitty gonna live longer than me? And then do I need to get a will or a trust for my kitty or my doggy? These are questions, right? When you're young, you think ahead like, oh, in 10 years I'll buy a house, and maybe 20 years I'll travel, and, you know, I'll do all these different things. But when you're my age, it's like, well, maybe in 10 or 20 years I can have my ashes scattered over Lake Michigan. And that's my time. No prayer.